Okay, okay, yeah, perfect. And maybe just because there is a couple of extra people joining, and Victor himself, of course, is not so familiar with the directed project, I just thought I'd take 1 or 2 minutes to briefly introduce the project and especially the real world lab context, which is very relevant for the discussion part. So just bear with me, directed colleagues, because this is all very obvious to all of you. So our directed project is a Horizon funded project, a 4-year project, which started in October 2022. We have 18 different consortium partners across 8 different countries. We have a mix of lots of different partners across science, across government, NGOs, and practice. So a really nice mix of different agencies. Overall, our focus is strengthening disaster resilience for climate extreme events and really bringing together the disaster risk reduction community and the climate change adaptation community, and doing that through enhancing our data modeling and tools interoperability, and also our communication and governance, and with a strong focus on knowledge co-production in real world labs. And just to introduce our 4 real world labs, the locations of those. So we have the capital region of Denmark. We have the Rhine-Earth region that was badly flooded in 2021. And our lead partner there is the Earthverband, a water board. We have the Emilia-Romagna region, and our lead partners there are regional agencies for civil protection and the environment. And then we have the Danube region, where our lead partners are the Zala Search and Rescue Team, so a local NGO in the Zala region in Hungary, and also a insurance company, Kellyard & Co. So we have a nice mix of different agencies and practitioners kind of involved in our real world labs, and all of these have been super busy bringing together lots of different stakeholders to tackle the specific challenges in their real world labs. And this is bringing together, again, government agencies, NGOs, planners, municipalities, some national agencies, be that your hydromet agencies, coastal authorities, and trying to figure out who needs to be involved in that lab and how can we engage with them through methods of knowledge co-production. And I think this discussion and this webinar series is going to be really interesting for our labs to try and unravel a bit more how we can enhance that engagement, maybe widen that engagement, maybe do that engagement slightly differently. So this, especially during the discussion part, I hope we can unravel that a bit more together with Victor and learn from his experiences in Brazil and internationally. So yeah, that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Victor now, once I get this slide down and then the right one up. So bear with me for a second. Okay, and now I'm going to do this one. It's this. Okay. And here we go. Okay, how does that look, Victor?
Thank you very much, Lydia, and Max for the invitation. And for all the participants here, I will share some experience based on my engagement as not only as an operational expert in the monitoring room of Cemaden, which is the Brazilian Early Warning Center, but also as a researcher at this same institution. Cemaden is a type of institution that we have operational tasks, such as monitoring floods and landslides risks, but also a research department. And so it's something that it's not, we don't have this type of institution in all early warning agencies, right? I think this aspect is important because usually warning agencies are more focused on everyday practice, and sometimes it's difficult to change this practice and perspectives and etc. And this, I think, it's an important aspect because I think we all as researchers, we wish to change, to transform the institutions. And sometimes the institutions have cultural resistance, even for this new approach, such as citizen science approach. And I will try to talk just a little bit about this aspect during my presentation. Next, please. So at Cemaden, when I started my activities here at the monitoring room, people use it to ask me, what's a sociologist doing here? And this was a type of bullying question, right? Because they didn't understand that sociologists have been engaging with disaster topics since 1950s, right? So all the time we had to show the importance of sociologists, but also for other experts, such as political science, anthropologists, social geographers, communication experts, and etc. So, but we have a common mission, right? That's to engage people in warning systems and try to produce anticipated and comprehensive warnings to trigger anticipatory action. So we had to discuss methods and concepts on how to work together. And this takes some years, right? Because geologists have different concepts and definitions. We have different methods. As a disaster experts, we try to explain that disaster is a result of process, but geologists understand process in a different way, right? So it's why we try to create these ways of improving our interaction based on how we create some glossary or lexicon or vocabulary that we can share with between the scientists, but also when we would engage non-scientists, we need some basic terminologies to start the discussion. And this has been a challenge, right? So it's why I think when we started interdisciplinary research, which involves at least 2 scientists from different fields jointly studying some aspects together, right? Sharing methods, data, and concepts. But also when we start a transdisciplinary project that consider knowledge from non-scientists. And it seems some basic thing, but people have different definitions and understanding about what is interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research, right? So I think it's important to explain this to scientists, but also to non-scientists. Next, please. So it depends on what are you studying, what will be the key concepts that you will work. And I think most are familiar with these disaster risk equations, right? Device. And in Brazil, we usually, this disaster risk device consider the hazard and vulnerability aspects, but capacities and public policies of mitigation are less considered in the scientific community, but also in the policy discussions. And so in the last couple of years, we tried to bring this mnemonic device of Wisner et al. To discuss with scientists, but also with policymakers, practitioners, and communities. What would be your task, your mission in these different aspects of disaster risk? How you can contribute. And usually people recognize their contribution in hazard and vulnerability aspects, but less on capacity and mitigation aspects. So it's why in the recent years, we are trying to focus on capacity and mitigation activities here at Cemaden. Next, please. And when we look at mitigation aspects, we need to show that we have these structural mitigation actions, but also the non-structural mitigation actions, such as warning systems. But even when we look at warning systems, there are a lot of recommendations to promote people-centered warning systems, but I think we don't have a clear definition what's a people-centered warning system and how to promote it, right? It's why it was interesting because I think in the 2022 there was the launch of the Early Warning for All initiative, right? And there were a lot of events and webinars discussing this early warning system for all. And it was very interesting how when I showed this this figure, this table, right, with this last mile and first mile approach and the four components of warning systems, people were sometimes surprised, but I just did a good literature review and try to organize the discussion, and then people start to think, oh yeah, we need to think on how to promote a first mile approach in the different components of warning systems, in the risk knowledge and monitoring and warning, communication and response capacities. So sometimes we think that people are very familiar with the approaches and concepts, but in the this is something not real sometimes, right? And I think we need to something that we are trying to do is how we can spread this message and ways of thinking about people-centered warning systems for different sectors. It's why in the recent years we're trying to tailor or think about warning systems for cultural heritage sector, for educational sector, because we, at least in Brazil, the disaster risk field is in a way controlled, right, or framed by military personnel of civil defense or hazard scientists, more to be more specific, by meteorologists, right? So we need to we need to try to democratize, right, this discussion. Next, please. And one thing that I think it's important when you are designing a project or co-producing a project, it's because it's to think about the different types of participation. This is because we have a mantra, right, of all the projects need to be participatory, right? And even if you are an engineer and you are submitting a project, you need to show the social aspect of your project, and you need to show that it's something participatory, right? But we need to question the types of participation involved in these different projects. So when some years ago, when we did a literature review about how warning systems were articulated with citizen science or participatory approaches, we realized that people were framing something as participatory, but they were doing interviews, right? That's a form of consulting type. So doing interviews, it's not something that's truly participatory, right? So and I think the challenge that we will face, right, in these forthcoming years is how we can create participation, right? Because we will be managed by artificial intelligence and all the social media, and disasters will require a skill, an ability related to how we mobilize and do things together. But all the technology that we are living now led us to think about individually, right? And I think it's important more than ever to think about the ways that we engage people and promote participation. Next, please. So, but there are other challenges. When we think about participation, we have a different actors and agents and stakeholders and etc. And this figure, it's just to explain, to show, even in a country, in a continental country like Brazil, when we think about warning systems, we have different agencies at the national level, subnational level, and etc. So we have different types of data, hydrological data from the National Water Agency. So a lot of data that we need to combine and receive at Cemaden. But this type of strategy is still top-down, right? So in the recent years, we are trying to create ways of involving people in warning systems, not only as a warning receiver, right? And the other strategy is how we create strategy for local warning systems, for to be to have an autonomy, because when we face extreme events in tropical countries like Brazil, we have more than 60 millimeters of rain in 20 minutes, in 10 minutes, right? And the warning the national warning will not reach the locals, right, in sufficient time. Next, please. So when we think about these different actors during the COVID-19 pandemic, we started a new project that was a request from the National Civil Defense and a United Nations Development Program. They want to know the capacities of municipal civil defense in Brazil, right? For instance, if they have a computer, how many people were working in the local civil defense? What if they have a municipal budget to implement their actions? How they communicate with citizens, how they communicate with state and national agencies and other sectors in the city. So we implemented a lot of qualitative and quantitative methods, right? Survey, a questionnaire with about 2,000 municipalities in Brazil. Brazil have 5,000 municipalities. Some virtual focus groups using Zoom. And this was very important because we realized that municipalities were not talking with each other. And they were during the COVID-19 pandemic. They need to share the challenge that they are facing and also the impacts, right? So this is something I think very important, how you facilitate these conversations between different municipalities that share a same watershed, right? Interviews to have a deep comprehension about some aspects related to that were mentioned in the questionnaire. And we also realized that if we follow a logic that you do the interview, you apply the questionnaire, and then you wait 6, 8 months to invite your research partners again. And now, oh, we are sharing the results. This would not work, right? Because during the project, we have to do this baseline about the situation of municipal civil defense, but based on this diagnostic, we need to co-produce a proposal to strengthen the implementation of the national policy, the DRR policy, in these municipalities. So we would need this conversation with our research partners. So we try to keep the mobilization during the research project. And one way of doing that was organize webinars, such as you are doing, right, in your project. But we invited the municipal civil defense and journalists and other experts, non-scientists, to talk about the topic. And the partners also can propose, right, some aspects to be discussed. So this helped us. For instance, we had 400 followers in the YouTube channel, and now it's 2,200, right? So there was a growing mobilization, increasing mobilization during the project, and this was good. Next, please. So this is some aspects of the situation, that the baseline, right, that we have less than 15% of the Brazilian cities have DRR plans, less than 10% have warning systems, local warning systems, and most of them don't have a budget to implement the actions. So if you don't have a budget, how you put the DRR recommendations into practice, right, into action? So this is something very important. Sometimes in the municipalities, the health sector, the urban planning sector, they didn't know what civil defense or emergency management unit do, right? So it's why it's important to promote this interaction, and also these big events that they facilitate people to share the experience on how they implement their local initiatives and etc. Right. So just to sum up, we realized that all the findings can be summarized in 5 main aspects. One was related to a lack of professionalization of municipal civil defense or emergency management sector, right? Sometimes they don't have a career. And nobody is looking this expertise as a professional thing, right? So we have to bring an expert of sociology of professions to help us to create a specific implementation plan to improve these professional aspects, right? The second is the financial resource, and sometimes funding is concentrated at the national level, but you don't have special programs to create and improve the local services related to emergency management or DRR. So sometimes you can recommend a lot of things that municipalities need to do, but they don't have budget. So the third aspect is related to communication, right? And usually communication happens when a disaster occurs. But it's very difficult to show that the national system needs to create these strategies to maintain the interaction between the national, state, and municipal levels. So it's why we suggested to the National Civil Defense to create a social media strategy, but also some webinars such as that connected people in the National Civil Defense. And I think this is important, right? Not only during the disaster, but before the disaster, how you keep people talking with people. It seems something very basic, but it make a difference. Start. Next, please. Yeah. The other, it's related to capacity building aspects. When you have a continental country, such as Brazil, you have different regions and biomes and etc. So capacity building aspects, yeah, you can keep this. You have to tailor, right, this capacity building according to specific needs of that region. But you need to listen to the agents of this that region, right? And one way that we did this during the COVID-19 pandemic was to create this virtual seminar, right? Summarizing a expo, right? A virtual expo where agents can share their experience. Next, please. But so we in the other important aspect is that when you think about participation, you need to think not only social participation, the citizens, right, but also at the local level, the participation between the different agencies. Right, it's something that happens during the disaster, but before the disaster is very rare. Yeah, and when we think about these special sectors, one of them is, I think it's educational sector, and we faced a lot of cultural resistance within Cemaden, right? Because there were scientists that thought that educational aspects were not important, and Cemaden should not do that. But we need to show using their methods, right, that we have a lot of schools in flood and landslide prone areas. And this is just a sample, right, of Brazil. And after that, we reduced some of this cultural resistance between the scientists of science. Next, please. So based on that, we started to think about methods on how to engage the schools in disaster issues. And we have a lot of initiatives in Brazil where local civil defense go to school, offer a lecture, right? Sometimes follows military doctrine, right? And but it's not sufficient, because even when we think about education is changing a lot. So we need experts from educational sector to tell what are the pedagogical methods that this generation of students would like to adopt. So one way was to create with experts and teachers these methods to engage students as a researchers, right? As young researchers at the high school. And so we invited an oral history expert to explain the method, and then the students apply the method with some survivors of the 2000 flood in the city of São Luís do Paraitinga. And then once the local history about disasters is not written in a book, they are in the memory of people. And if you need to prepare the younger generation, you need to put them in contact, in dialogue with the older generations, right, that have experience with disasters. So it was a way that we promote this dialogue, and it was very interesting because during the conversations, the students started to make some questions that were not in the our semi-structured interview, right? This is something very interesting. So sometimes you need to listen the students on what they want to ask for policymakers and practitioners and etc. The other was risk knowledge aspect, that we use participatory mapping, and you know that we have different tools, and monitoring and participatory monitoring. This is something that's important because our early warning network to monitor hazards, it's very expensive. So we also trying to implement these low-cost initiatives where people can monitor the rainfall data and share using apps. But to create a good app that people will use, you need to combine not only the expertise of computer scientists, but also educational experts, because you can create a good app, right? A beautiful app, but people will not use. And so you need to keep the mobilization of students and high schools. And yeah, next, please. And one way to do that was through this waterproofing data project that was an international project that partnered with Cemaden. And we have, Cemaden has a good network of actors, but we needed these computer science experts to produce these dashboards and apps. So we brought these computer scientists to the school to listen to students and teachers, and they create this app based on inputs of people that would use it. And now that there is another important aspect that I really want to share, is that when you start a project, you have a deadline, right? A 3-year project or 4-year project that you have in this project. But for the policymaker, the app was developed, right? But then the director of Cemaden asked, oh, so I need to keep this app. How much will cost? So what I'm trying to think is that you also need a business strategy after the project on how the actors could implement what you developed, and the cost involved, the number of people that the institution would need. So this is something that I think it's very important, but we didn't think about it in the beginning of the project. Next, please. So this project was good in terms of developing different methods, and even to bring the OpenStreetMap community to scientists that didn't know the OpenStreetMap's tools and etc. And it was very interesting when we did these capacity building activities in the school because the students started to think about other uses that OpenStreetMap would have for their community. And they were very interested in learning on how to use OpenStreetMaps. And even for the governments, right? The state government of Acre that faced recurrent floods, they started to ask the research team to help them to evaluate the damage related to the flood, right? So the team used the OpenStreetMaps and did this a task force, right, to increase our research team in to help to map, right? But something that I think you are facing everywhere is that when you have a disaster, you have a lot of volunteers, even from the OpenStreetMap community. And sometimes people are working in parallel, right? And they generated different maps, and these maps are available in the internet. But the policymakers, they didn't know what map they will consider, right? So it's why you need to train this OpenStreetMap community before the disaster, also as a strategy. So it's something that we are the phase 2 of waterproofing projects are working on. Next, please. Yeah, one important aspect is that I forget to say, is that even when you are creating this citizen science initiative and etc., you also need to work with operational experts at warning agencies, because they didn't trust in citizen science, citizen generated data. And you need to explain, you have to have some good initiatives to show to this agency, oh, look, that this is working in Indian case, this is working in another place. So you need to show that that citizen generated data has been used in other place. So what I'm trying to say is that we also have this cultural resistance to change in institutions. Next, please. Yeah, it's good. And something that now it's not a project, but it's a program, is that the educational project of Cemaden now is a program. So it's permanent. So it's have funding, have people, right? And so this is important. So we have, during the whole year, the program is running, but we also have these specific moments where we organize this national DRR campaign to mobilize people. And I think this is something very important when you think about different ways of engaging, right, people through social media, but also other things that are meaningful according to your culture, for example. Next, please. I'm just finishing. Yeah, and something that we also realize during a PhD project is that there are places in the world that the disaster suffer a type of spectacularization, right? Everybody goes there, and local people suffer a type of research fatigue, right? There is an interesting piece of Laurie Pickey and J.C. Gillard about that. And when we visit this city of São Luís do Paraitinga that faced the flood, we realized that people doesn't want to be interviewed, right? They were very furious with researches and etc. So we decided to create this participatory 3D mapping and put this in the central plaza, and people were curious about this participatory 3D mapping, and it was the way that we started our engagement. And what I'm trying to say is that depending on you are trying to do this project, you face a lot of conflicts. And sometimes you need to create this tool that facilitate on how to deal the conflicts. Yeah, and after that, we create a different qualitative and quantitative methods that are good in terms of reaching right confidence on what are you studying. Yeah, next please. Yeah, so this is an example. The church was damaged during the flood, and in the interviews everybody talked about the church. So we had this in our team, undergraduate students from architecture that go to the field with us and try to reproduce this church, right, in the participatory 3D mapping. So when people look at the church in the participatory 3D mapping, they identify with them. And you also can create these, can have materials that people can create the humans or pets or something that are meaningful to them. And for example, in the left side of your screen, there is a dog that was a child that created this dog. We didn't think about pets during participatory 3D mapping. So it's something that people can talk about playing, right? Next, please. But you can also use art and other meaningful ways that explain to people what are you doing. So this was based on the research findings. The undergraduate student from architecture, she told me, oh, there is in architecture, there is these artists that follow this, and I want to do with my research findings. And I, as an advisor, I was very worried at first, but then I said, oh, you can try, you can show me. And then she did this very interesting picture that everybody at São Luís do Paraitinga was fascinated, right? And because it's explained how we have the urban sprawl in the city from 1950 to 2010, and the memories of people about the 2000 flood according to the place in the city, such as the Matriz Church, the Igreja Matriz, and other places. So it's a way to talk about the disaster, right? Next, please. And I think I almost finished. Yeah, but we one of the challenges that we have, warning agency in general, is how we include people with impairments in warning systems. And in Brazil, almost 25% of people in Brazil have a type of impairment, right? And so in this dissertation, Gisele Gomes, she worked with this local civil defense, but also organizations that worked with blind people to create this tactile risk mapping. So people would recognize in not in the institution that they are or their homes, but in the city, the places that are a flood-prone area. But so this is something related to accessibility that we still need to improve in warning system and even in our articles and etc. Because sometimes we use the figures and images and we don't have the alternative text, right, related to this figure. I think it's next, and then I finish. Yeah. So so this is my social media and etc. My email. If you want to write me, feel free. And thank you very much for the opportunity. And I'm open to questions and the dialogue. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Victor. Wow, I'm nearly speechless now. It just covered so many aspects that so nicely fits in with everything that we're trying to do in Directed. You've just covered from the national policy links right down to engaging with marginalized groups. And I think there's so much there for the real world labs to learn. And yeah, I really want to open the floor to questions because I'm sure there's so much that people want to ask. So I don't have a good view at the moment. Hold on. Yes, okay. I saw some questions, but now I can't see our hands